Okay, so in the event that it was my phone and not my computer and not my internet. I don't know which it was, but I'm switching over to the phone. Okay, so hopefully people can start coming back in. Good. People are starting to come back in now. I don't know if it was the computer or the phone or what it was, but I'm just thrilled that we made it through 10 lessons. I mean, 10 lessons before we had a technological difficulty that caused the whole dang thing to crash. So, good. Yeah, Sarah says much better. So I'm not sure if it was the phone or if it was the computer. I mean, if it was the internet or the computer, but now we're on the phone. And my brand new phone, by the way, because my phone died a couple weeks ago. So we had 3 cars and my phone all die in the same month. So it was a great month, May. Along with COVID and riots and all of that too. So now we'll start back over. What I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted by technology was that no class next week. June 16th we finish Job. Then I have my hip replacement surgery, and Sarah just said, I think you were. No, I think I was connected to the right Wi-Fi. I think it was just that I was. It was the computer, I think. So anyway, we'll finish Job on June 16th. Then I have my hip surgery. Then I have my sabbatical. So October 27th is when we'll start up a new class. Okay, October 27th. I would like to try starting it from 6 to 7 because we have the guys who play darts and we have people who have meetings on Tuesday nights. And so I'd like to say let's try 6 to 7. If that's not possible for you, if you absolutely cannot make 6 to 7, let me know just so I know how many people are saying, no, there's no way I could see it from 6 to 7. But we will be live streaming as well as live in the Trinity Center. We'll do both on beginning October 27th. And then also, I'd like some ideas for what you'd like to study. I prefer to do a book of the Bible as opposed to topical Bible studies because I just think topical Bible studies tend to get all over the place. So I prefer to do a book of the Bible. I'm pretty much open to any book that you're interested in. Job came from Sue Lauder. Sue had asked if we could study Job, and I hadn't taught Job in a long, long time, so I was real happy to do it. But be sure to send me an email. Let me know what book that you'd like to study. And I see already someone suggesting Philippians. Okay, so I will make a note of that. That's always I love Philippians because every time Jim Smelter is the lay assistant, if Philippians is one of the readings, he'll look at the reader who has Philippians and say, and remember, it's Philippians, not Fallopians. And of course, now that word is stuck in the other reader's head, and Jim Smelter's name has been cursed on more than one occasion for that very reason, or for lots of other reasons too, but for that reason in particular. All right, let's begin with prayer. Lord God, we give you thanks for gathering us together to study the book of Job, and we ask you, Lord, that you would be with us, that you'd open our minds and our hearts, that we might hear you speak, and that we might be able to apply these words to our lives. This we ask in your holy name. Amen. All right. Oh, you guys are coming. My live studio audience is coming into my office now. That's great. They're joining me.
I can't even find it on my phone.
You can't?
I'm just.
Is it not coming through on the phone? Dave said it was.
It probably is. I'm not pushing it right.
Okay. Well, a lot of people are here, so somebody's here anyway. No, Judy, leave my chair there. You have to sit with your back to me. I don't want you breathing on me. Everyone put your mask on. All right. Well, you missed the prayer, so now you'll have to pray by yourselves. Okay. So we're at chapter 38 of Job. If you want a Bible, they're up there on that shelf up there. There are Bibles. If you want to grab one.
No, that's
okay.
to look on my phone.
Danya has it memorized, so she doesn't need it.
No, I can look
She
on my
memorized it in the
phone.
Hebrew, so it's a little tricky for her sometimes to.
Well, you shouldn't have married a Jew. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
a Czechoslovakian Jew. It could be. It could be. Okay, chapter 38. My favorite. We're getting into my favorite part of Job now, because this is where God finally speaks. So we've been listening to Job and his friends, and it's gone round and round and round, and it's been thoroughly irritating sometimes, and long and tedious sometimes. And now we get into God is always succinct and always spot on, and because he's God. And so 38 and 39 are just phenomenal. They're God's answers to Job. And so we're going to just plow through those verses. Verse 38. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, okay, so first thing I want you to pay attention to is Job. Remember, God has not spoken to Job since chapter 2, right? So chapter 2 is the last time he heard God speak. That we heard God speak. Job hadn't heard him at all. But we heard God and Satan in the throne room talking with each other in chapter 1 and 2, right? And so then Job, and then we haven't heard a word from God through all of this. Oh, look here, Danya is watching. I am here. It's just like Horton hears the Who. I'm here. I am here.
Yes.
And so finally God speaks. 38 chapters. Now, I want you to think about that. I love the old saying, and I say it to young pastors frequently. The old saying is that God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Okay, because you should listen twice as much as you speak, and you probably are thinking, "Physician, heal thyself," but you're too polite to say it. But the point is that listen how patient God has been here. I mean, they have said some really difficult stuff to Job. I mean, to God, Job. I mean, and think about. I want you to think about. I think about it like this. Judy and I, when we go on youth trips, and all of you who have children, do not give our secret away. Okay, you are not allowed. You're not allowed to breathe a word of this. But children assume that the drivers on youth trips are deaf. Okay, they just assume that we're either deaf or too stupid to understand. Okay, which is great because Judy and I find out all of our best information riding in the front seat on youth trips, because they just talk freely and openly about everything and everybody and everything that's going on. And but it's really, really hard sometimes not to jump in, to keep your mouth shut and just let them talk. Because if you jump in, then it's going to shut them down, and then you're not going to find out anything more. Then they're done. Okay, so it's really hard. I find with raising my own boys that it was tough particularly when they were middle school, teenager, and when they hold forth, especially teenagers, when they hold forth and they start telling you how life is, it's really hard not to jump in and tell them how stupid they are. But it's really important to listen to them, because just by you listening, you have done more than anything you can say. In other words, by listening to them, you have validated. That is why my boys took karate. by listening to them, yeah, because I can't mute you like I can on Zoom. By listening to them, you have validated them as people. Okay, and we do that with everybody, not just kids, but with everybody. When we listen to people, we validate them as people. We help them be more secure and more feel more safe in who they are. If we talk over them all the time, or argue with them, or even when they're completely stupid, if we jump in and tell them how stupid they are, now we have broken down the line of communication. So I want you to first of all think about that God listened for 37 chapters. He didn't say a word. He just listened. And you'll find that throughout the scriptures many times, God listening. And sometimes even as you read, you want to say, God, do something. God, get in there. Do something. Take care of this. Answer them. because we want to help him out, because he's God and he needs our help, don't you know? Yeah, Jamie says, yes, but some things I'd rather not know. It reminds me of when we were adults, the four of us, well, the three of us mostly, would be in the kitchen with Mom, and we'd be talking about things that happened when we were growing up. Mom would go, la, 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 because she didn't want to hear about all the stuff we had done that she didn't know about, she didn't want to know about. Okay, so first of all, the fact that he listened for 37 chapters. Now, and he answers him out of a whirlwind. Why do you think that's important? That God answers him out of a whirlwind. And I don't know that there's a singular answer for this. I mean, I'm not asking for some kind of, it's not a trick question. I don't know either. I'm just thinking it's interesting, right? That of all the ways God, I mean, this is called a theophany. When God appears to people in different ways, it's called a theophany. It comes from the word theos, which is God, and epiphaneo, which is to appear. It's where we get the word epiphany, as Jesus is appearing to us. So theopiphaneo, theophany, is God appearing. And think of the ways he appears. Yeah, Okay,
enough's enough.
Yeah, think of the different ways that he appears. Sometimes he comes at, like when he's walking in the garden with Adam and Eve, right? Seems like is like real quiet and mild mannered and cool, out walking in the garden. When he came down from heaven to inspect Babel, remember that, the Tower of Babel? He comes down to inspect Babel, and it's like he's a reporter. He's coming down to get information. Not anything big or anything like that. It's almost like he snuck in. It's like the people didn't really notice that he was there. Remember when he came to see Abraham, and the three angels that came to see Abraham, and one of them was God, and we know that because Abraham worshipped him and he accepted the worship. An angel will never accept worship, but this one did, so we know it was God. Okay, so that appeared to Abraham as an angel, as somebody who Abraham would revere, respect, whatever. So God appears to people in this theophany idea in different ways for different times, and it's interesting to me that he comes at and a really good one, Elijah. Remember, Elijah's waiting for God, and Elijah thinks he's going to be in the whirlwind, but he isn't. Remember that? Which kind of tells you that maybe Elijah knew Job's story, right? Because Elijah would have come much later than Job, hundreds and hundreds of years after Job. And so he looks for God in the whirlwind, and then he looks for God in something else. I can't remember what the other thing was. Was it I can't remember what it was, thunder or something like that, storm or a storm or something. He looked for God, and God wasn't there either. But then where was God for Elijah? Remember?
Fiery chair.
No, that was later. That's how he took him to heaven. But when he's in the cave, and he's, remember Elijah gets ticked off because nobody's listening to him, and so he does what all pastors do. He goes and pouts, and so he goes to the cave and he says, "Never mind, God, just forget it. I'll just die. I'll just die here. Just leave me alone." And God sent ravens to bring him food, and then there was a little brook to get water, and then finally God comes and God waits for a while, lets him kind of stew for a while, and then God comes and talks to him, and he comes, and Elijah, there's a whirlwind, and Elijah thinks it's that, and then there's like a storm or something like that, and Elijah thinks it's that, and then there's the still, small, quiet voice, and that was God speaking. So that time God comes as a whisper, So it's really interesting. I mean, there have been whole studies written on how God appears, but I think it's really interesting the way he chooses to appear to people at particular times and particular places. Here he comes in the whirlwind. Now, maybe it was because earlier, I think it was in maybe chapter, I don't know if I wrote that down or not, where Job said, something about a whirlwind. Let me see if I... Job 9:17, Job says, "For he crushes me with a tempest and multiplies my words without cause." So maybe because Job seems to think he's coming in a tempest, maybe he says, "Okay, I'll do that." I I wonder if it's also has to do with God, like what Dave said, God saying enough is enough. Okay, I'm done with this. Now sit up and pay attention, because he really does kind of lay into Job here, in a good way. But nevertheless, if it's God, I mean, I don't think any of us, if God spoke to any of us like this, none of us would think it was wonderful. You know, I mean, it wouldn't be a mountaintop experience for us. It'd be like, holy mackerel, what have I done now? So let's look at verses. Let's see. Oh, one more thing about theophany I wanted to say before we move on. What was the ultimate theophany? What was the ultimate theophany? God's appearance in the ultimate appearance.
In human form.
Yeah, Jesus, right? Yeah, that was the ultimate theophany. And since then, it's never happened again. That was the ultimate and the final theophany, is God actually becoming human, which is pretty awesome. You know, if you trace through the Bible and you look at all the ways God appears, pillars of fire, pillars of cloud, small whispers, walking in the garden, you know, the angels, all these ways, burning bush, yeah, all the theophanies, and then you get to Jesus, and that's, you know, that is the ultimate of the theophanies. I think it's really cool to think about that. God's first words to Job: "Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge?" Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? That's a wonderful question. Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? It's really the perfect description of everybody who's ever judged God, right? Because I don't care who we are. You know, we can be like my grandfather and have 2 PhDs in theology. We're still toddlers in an adult world when compared to God. You know, we're like you know, going up to kindercare and getting 5 or 6 toddlers to come figure out life. You know, and you can imagine how helpful that would be. You know, that's how we are compared to God. So when we judge God the way Job has been judging God, okay, that's what we darken. We darken counsel by words. Okay, I get very frustrated with that. I have no problem with anybody having a question about God, because I have lots of questions about God. There's tons of things that I don't understand. I've studied it for you know, I mean, professionally for, you know, 30 years as a pastor, and 8 years as a student before that, and then, you know, 6 more years as a student after as a pastor. And I mean, I've studied it, and I still have lots of questions about God, you know, and I have no problem with a question. I have a problem with a judgment. I have a problem with these people who say things like, how could God, you know, if God is good, how could he do this? How could God allow that? You know, I have huge problems with that. And I have huge problems, to be honest with you. I have huge problems with judging motives of anybody, because we can't see another person's soul. What does the 8th commandment tell us? 8th commandment tells us, put the best construction on everything. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. How do you know it's false? You don't. So don't. You know, don't bear any bad witness against your neighbor unless you have complete proof of it. Okay, and you're in a position where you have to. You know, like you see somebody, you know, breaking into a car, and the police say, "Did you see this person breaking into the car?" Well, you can't lie. Yes, I saw them breaking into the car. But why were they breaking into the car? You don't know. Maybe they needed to get their wallet that they forgot in the car. Maybe they locked their keys in the car. You don't know. All you can say, yes, I saw them breaking into the car. Okay, if you have seen, not to get, I don't care if we get political. I mean, not to get political, but I don't care either. President Trump holding the Bible in front of that church, and the bishop of that church railed against him. I would be so dang excited to have our church on national news with the president standing in front of it. I would be doing cartwheels. I don't care who the president is. I don't care if it's Warren G. Harding, who was supposedly the worst president ever. According to historians, the president of the United States, one of the most recognizable faces in the entire world, holding a Bible and standing in front of our church sign. I would be ecstatic about that, But yet there's all these people railing against him. Why?
And saying that he has never opened a Bible.
Yeah, how do they know? How do they know? I don't know what the man's motives are. I don't know. I dare not judge him for that. I have to go. All I can go with is what he says. Jesus knows what's in his heart. I don't. Okay. Every time I get up on Sunday morning and proclaim from the pulpit, all you can do is trust that I'm saying what I mean from my heart. You can't see my heart. That's all you can do with a human being. We don't have the ability that Jesus has to look into people's hearts. So you have to go with what you see. Okay. So God comes at him and says, this is a great line too. I mean, it's going to take me forever to get through this if I keep stopping and going on 15 minutes for each verse. I'm going to be like Bishop. It takes 3.5 years to get through Matthew. But anyway, dress for action like a man. I will question you, and you will make it known to me. Now, dress for action like a man is a really fun saying, because if we had people here today with a King James version, they would find out that it says, gird your loins. Okay, that's what dress for action, the real Hebrew is translated, gird your loins. What does that mean?
Get ready for battle.
Huh?
Get ready for battle.
Yeah, right. And gird your loins was actually a real technical term. Because remember, men wore tunics, right? Which were sort of skirts that came down below their knees, right? So you can't really fight very well wearing a dress, So what men would do is they would they would take the fabric pull it up between their legs, the other way, backwards, and then make like two pieces and then tie it around their waist. So they'd make it into like shorts.
They look like genies.
Kind of, yeah, right, yeah, kind of like genies, exactly, yeah. And so they'd make it like shorts, and that was actually girding your loins. That's really what it was. Today we might put on your jockstrap. I don't know. we might have a different way of saying it today, but basically, get ready for battle. That's what it means. God's saying, get ready, because we're gonna dance, you and me. He says in verse 4, where were you when dress for act like a man. I will question you, and you will make it known to me. That was not a question, right? I will question, and if you can, help me out here. No. He was telling Job, you're going to answer, son. Yeah, you got all these questions. I got some questions for you. Isn't that interesting? That all along, what has Job been calling for all along? What has he been asking all along?
Enlightenment.
On what, specifically?
On what he did wrong.
Right. That's all he wants to know. He's not even asking for his kids back. He's not asking for his money back. He's not asking for his land back. He's not asking for a better wife. All he's asking is, tell me what I did wrong. Tell me what I did to deserve this. That's all he's asking. And when God comes at him, what's the first thing God does? He starts asking questions. He won't give him an answer. He says, I will question you, and you will make it known to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? Or what were its bases on what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Okay, this is one of my favorite parts, because some of you may know that there are times once in a while, great while, that I might be sarcastic just a little bit. Okay? And I love being vindicated here that God is far more sarcastic than I ever thought about being. Okay, sarcasm is dripping out of God's mouth here. He is being completely sarcastic. He knows exactly what he's saying, and it proves that sarcasm is a valuable part of rhetoric. Is that, if somebody, that's how you make your point sometimes, is with sarcasm. And this is blatant sarcasm. What's that?
Okay, smarty pants.
Yeah, okay, smarty pants. Yeah, that's kind of what he's saying. So before we dare to judge God, he suggests that we consider creation. And since we cannot do any of it on our own, perhaps we shouldn't question God. It's amazing to me, as I said a little earlier, that people feel entitled, maybe is a good word, they feel entitled to question, regardless of how much training they have in that area. So, if I see a guy working on the telephone lines, I would never think in a million years of going out there and telling him how he should be doing it. Hey, buddy, you should be on the other side. I have no idea how to do his job. I've never been trained in how to do his job. I'm terrified of heights. So why on earth would I think that I'm qualified to tell him how to do his job? But yet, listen to how many people are happy to tell God how to do his job. And by the way, anybody who works in the area of religion, every opinion is valid. We have given out way too many trophies. We just have. And people who have no business thinking they have a valid opinion are happy to share their opinions with everybody about everything. And again, I have no problem with questions. Questions are a total different thing. If I'm curious, I wouldn't be, but if I was curious about what the guy was doing, I would say, hey, buddy, do you have a minute to tell me what you're doing up there? I'm interested in what you're doing. I'm interested in what you're doing. And if you have a minute, I'd love to hear, why is it that one wire is red and one wire is blue? Does that tell you something? Well, I guess electricians probably know, what that is. I wouldn't know. I'd have to ask Derek. I could call Derek and ask him. Better yet, I just call Derek and ask him to do it for me. And that way, I don't have to die of electrocution hooking up a lamp. So it's much easier. Paying Derek is much cheaper than hospital bills, as it turns out. I'm starting to learn that. But questioning, no problem. That kind of judging attitude comes from too many trophies being given out. Verse 7, when the morning stars sing together. Anybody have any ideas on what that is? What the morning stars are? You ever think about that? What's that? When the morning star, okay, he's talking about the creation of the world. When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. What's that make you think about? Yeah, angels. Right, exactly. Yeah, the angels. And I never, honestly, until I led this study, I never thought about that. Chemnitz says, Jamie says, I just love all the opinions on how to teach fifth grade. That was sarcasm. Yeah. Have you noticed there with the shutdown now that everybody's an expert on educating children? I've noticed that. I never knew there were so many experts. I also did not know there were so many experts on constitutional law or virology. Turns out everybody knows this stuff. I don't know how I missed it. Martin Chemnitz, a famous Lutheran theologian, he was sort of the guy who came after Luther. So after Luther died, I can't remember Chemnitz's exact dates, but it was sometime shortly after Luther. And Chemnitz says he adds this regard to the angels. Talking about morning stars saying together. The picture there is of the angels festively singing and rejoicing at creation, which is a pretty cool thought, as God creates the world and the angels all breaking forth in song. There's Revelation 22:16. This is Jesus speaking. Revelation 22:16. I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you about these things for the churches. I am the root and the descendant of David, the bright morning star. Yeah, so Jesus is the morning star. So this is talking about morning stars, and Jesus is the morning star. He goes on in verse 8. Or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out of the womb? When I made clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed limits for it, and set bars and doors, and said, "Thus far shall you come and no farther, and here shall your proud waves be stayed." This is one of my favorite parts of Job here, when he tells he tells the waves, "You can come this far." And I grew up most of my life, in more of my life than any place else, in Seattle and near the coast, and the all of the imagery of the waves. I can remember as a little kid asking my dad how the waves knew how far to come. Because I just didn't. How did they do that? They always come, because you could walk on the beach. You can see exactly where the high tide is, right? And you can see all on the driftwood where all the high tide marks are, and it's in a little kid's mind. It's like, there's some kind of mechanism here that halts the water there, like when you fill the bathtub. Because that's what a little kid thinks about, is like filling the bathtub. I want to know from my dad, how does it know? And I can remember him looking at me like, what a dumb question. I remember what he said.
How weird you are.
Yeah, I don't remember what he said. He had some answer, but I don't think it was theological in nature.
Probably chemical.
It was probably some kind of chemical. Yeah, that was like one of my favorite stories about my father is when I read Judy Blume's book Forever on the bus, and all the dirty parts are underlined in red, and the word rubber was in there, and I didn't know what it was. And so I came in after school and I asked my dad, because I had a feeling it was something dirty, so I didn't want to ask my mom, because that would have been embarrassing. So I waited until my mom was going to ask my dad. I said, "What's a rubber?" And he was reading the paper, and I can remember he lowered the paper and he looked over it at me, and he says, "It's a prophylactic device used to inhibit procreation." And he went back to read. For years, I thought it was a toothbrush. I mean, it's sort of like procreation sounds sort of like tooth decay, and a prophylactic device used to prohibit procreation. Yeah, I think I was about junior in high school before I found out it wasn't a toothbrush. But my dad wasn't the kind of guy you would ask any further. You asked the question, you got the answer. That was all there was to it. You didn't. The conversation did not continue with him. So anyway, the waves coming this far and no further. Verse 8 through 11. This is one thing I want to bring up too. The ocean is pictured almost like a birthing event, right? It's like God gave birth to the creation. It's this is it burst out of the womb. What womb? God's womb, which is very different, from the creation events that the people of the world at that time had experienced. And so there are a number of creation stories. Probably the Babylonian creation story is the best known. It's called I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, there's a Babylonian flood story, Babylonian creation story, and the creation story goes along something like, and those of you who are Babylonian religious scholars, don't hold me to this, but it's something like some god, I think it was Tiamat, got cut in half, and half of them became the earth, and half of them became the sky. And all of these creation stories, if you read the pagan creation stories, they're all either violent or capricious or both. Either you have some kind of horrendous violence being done between gods, and some kind of huge battle between gods, and then somehow out of that comes creation, or you have like this capricious chess playing god who let's do this, boom, let's create that, no, I can do this better, let's do that, but this idea of our God being a father who brings forth life from his womb, and there also, there's God. This is one of the places where God gives himself female characteristics, because we talk about God using the pronoun he, God the Father, he, and sometimes feminists get all upset about that, and we use he because that's the way God reveals himself. Okay, I don't know, that's just that's the pronoun he used, but he's not really male or female, he's everything, and so he does sometimes talk about himself with female characteristics. So you'll especially here you'll see the womb, and then you'll also see him talk about nurturing and loving in the Psalms and the Proverbs and things like that. So yeah, you will see him use female characteristics to describe himself sometimes. 12. Have you commanded the morning since your days began, and caused the dawn to know its place, that it might take hold of the skirts of the earth, and the wicked be shaken out of it? It is changed. It is changed like clay under the seal, and its features stand out like a garment. From the wicked their light is withheld, and their uplifted arm is broken. So, talking about the wicked being shaken out of the skirts of the earth, and the uplifted arm being broken, and light being withheld, it seems to me this is very poetic here. Because remember, all this is poetry. So just like English poetry is sometimes difficult to interpret, Hebrew poetry is even worse, because we don't know all the time exactly what these words are. So if you have a study Bible, every now and then you'll see Hebrew is uncertain, okay, because sometimes it only shows up one time and we're not sure what the word is. So we have to figure it out by context. But 12 through 15 clearly seems to be talking about the fact that God the evil has not gone unnoticed by God, right? It's just because God isn't going out and stopping the people from breaking the windows out of Target, okay, or Best Buy or wherever, doesn't mean that he hasn't noticed. Okay, it doesn't mean he's asleep at the switch. Sometimes he waits. He takes his time. He takes care of it. We don't have to worry about it, okay? We don't have to worry about people who do evil being avenged, because God will get to it when it's time, when he decides it's time. Okay, so he makes that point here that to Job, the wicked, their light is withheld and their uplifted arm is broken. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I'll take care of it when it needs to be done. Verse 16 through 18. Have you entered into the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen the gates of deep darkness? Have you comprehended the expanse of the earth? Declare if you know all of this. So earlier, Job and Zophar had both made statements about Sheol, which is the place of the dead, as though they know something about that. Who knows what happens when you die? Nobody, because ain't nobody ever come back and told us, okay? The only person who's ever died and gone to heaven and come back is Jesus. And Jesus told us what he told us, and it was precious little, which makes me think that we don't need to know.
You didn't think Lazarus did?
Lazarus didn't, he was dead, but he did not enter heaven and begin his eternal bliss, because he was brought back. He was just wherever you are. That's purgatory. It's wherever you are. From what we know, when you die, you immediately go either to heaven or hell. Okay, and then on the day of the resurrection, your fate will be confirmed, and you'll be rejoined to your body, and you'll go back to wherever.
Where does the angel thing come in?
I don't know what you mean.
When you die, an angel's with you.
Yeah, the angels take you to heaven.
Yeah.
So if you're going to heaven, the angels take you to heaven.
My angel will look like Sean Connery.
No, your angel looks like Woody Allen.
Oh.
God already told me.
What do you have to do?
First
Are you
thing I
discriminating against people that look like Woody Allen?
What's that?
Are you discriminating against people that look
Yes,
like Woody Allen?
yes, I am. I'm discriminating against people that look like Woody Allen. That's yeah.
I was afraid Jesus is going to look like Woody Allen. That's always been my fear.
No, Jesus looks like Jesus looks like that picture. That we have him out there in the hallway. What's he looking up? He has blue eyes and long brown hair.
Actually, our son looks like Jesus.
Wish you'd act more like him. Job 38:19. Where is the way to the dwelling of light, and where is the place of darkness, that you may take it to its territory, and that you may discern the paths to its home? You know, for you were born then, and the number of your days is great. Again, God is dripping with sarcasm here. So what happened to Lazarus when he was dead? We don't know. Okay, Bob asked, what happened to Lazarus when he was dead? We don't know. We have no idea what happened to Lazarus, or a better question is an even better question is, what about those 500 people that came out of the tomb when Jesus rose from the dead? Remember that? That there were over 500 people who were raised to life. Go back and everybody skips over that in the Gospels. Yeah.
Which book?
I don't know. It's it's a Lutheran Bible reference. It's in the Bible somewhere. That there were over 500 people who, the tombs shook and the dead rose, and there were people who were walking out of tombs when Jesus died. So the better question is, what about those people?
Yeah.
Were they just like stuck on a shelf somewhere and over there? What happened? I don't know. God, he tells us almost nothing about what happens between death and resurrection. And the only thing I can figure is that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, probably does.
Is that when we get to heaven, we're going to look at that and we're going to say, oh, well, that was stupid to even think about that. Obvious, duh. So yeah, I don't know. It's clearly something that we all wonder about, and God doesn't even address it. So what happened to Lazarus? I don't know. What happened to those other people? I don't know. What about Enoch? I don't know. Enoch was the one who walked with God and was transliterated to heaven and didn't have to die, like Elijah. There's only two that happened to, Enoch and Elijah, and maybe Moses. We don't know what happened to Moses. Because only God was up there when Moses went to heaven. So those are questions that are interesting to us. Apparently God thinks they're boring because he doesn't even address it. Let's see, 19 through 21, God's being sarcastic. So there have been some people who thought that this means something like Job was born before the world and some kind of proof that of pre-existence of spirits or something like that. But I don't think that's here. God's making a point that Job's probably when he goes through this, he's probably around 70 years old. Is the guess that commentators have. We don't really know exactly how old he was, but probably, let's say he's around 70. So he's not a young man. He's been around for a while, but he's not ancient. Let's see, 22. Have you entered the houses of the snow, or have you seen the storehouses of the hail, which I have reserved for the time of trouble, for the day of battle and war? What is the way to the place where the light is distributed, over where the east wind is scattered upon the earth? Okay, so this is an ancient way of thinking that God somewhere has like a storehouse of snow, and then when it's time to snow, he brings it out and dumps it on the earth, or hail or whatever. And there are times throughout the Bible when God uses the weather to affect the battles, that things happen, with wind and rain and hail and snow and all that stuff to affect battles. So essentially what God's saying here is that he controls the weather, not Job. So Job's making indictments against the person who controls the weather. Oftentimes, we're so enamored of science, that because, human beings are just always enamored of themselves. And we're so enamored that we can explain so much, and we know how weather patterns work and all that. But we couldn't create it. We can finally understand it, how it works, but we could never create that ourselves. Yeah, we can't stop it. We can't control it. It's pretty amazing that we even understand it. The basics of how it works is phenomenal. You look at that and you think, what kind of brilliance thought that up, of how to water the whole earth? I put in one sprinkler system in my life, and it was enough to cure me of ever wanting to put in another sprinkler system. It was so much trouble and there were so many variables that I had not accounted for, and it was so much harder than it seemed like it was going to be. Oh my gosh, what a pain! And I don't know if Jim's watching tonight, but Jim Slater is the guy who helped me do it. Actually, he did it, and I stood over and watched him mostly. But it was painful watching him do it. Imagine creating an ecosystem for the whole Earth that will water the Earth. Just phenomenal to think about that, how phenomenal that is. He goes on to say in verse 25, who has cleft a channel for the torrents of rain and a way for the thunderbolt, to bring rain on the land where no man is, on the desert in which there is no man, to satisfy the waste and desolate land, and to make the ground sprout with grass? Has the rain a father, or has begotten the drops of dew? From whose womb did the ice come forth? And who has given birth to the frost of heaven? The waters become hard like stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. Okay, and so he's referencing the seasons here. That God is the father of all of this cycle of rain and snow and whatnot. He goes on to say more about the seasons in 31. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades, or loose the cords of Orion? Can you lead forth the Mazzaroth in their season, which was a name of another constellation at that time? Or can you guide the bear with its children? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? Can you establish their rule on earth? So we're talking about the seasons, because the way they understood the seasons was from watching the stars, right? Which is important to remember that people in these days, everything not everything, but so much of their life was determined by the stars. When to plant, when to harvest. I mean, they didn't have a calendar. Okay, so they watched the stars. That's why the wise men who show up for Jesus, that's why they noticed that there was a strange new star in the sky, because these guys paid attention. They were astrologers of some sort, who the kings probably came to and said, okay, when's it time to plant? And they are the ones who watched the stars and told what the seasons, what's going on. So that's what God's referencing here. Verse 34, can you lift up your voice to the clouds, that a flood of waters may cover you? Can you send forth lightnings, that they may go and say to you, here we are? Who has put wisdom in the inward parts, or given understanding to the mind? Who can number the clouds by wisdom? Who can tilt the waterskins of the heavens, for rain? When the dust runs into the mass and the clods stick fast together, can you hunt the prey for the lion, or satisfy the appetite? And so forth and so on. God even talking about feeding the ravens. We're running out of time for tonight, but I want you to go ahead for next week and do read chapter 39 through. It just goes on with more of the things that God does that human beings can't. In verses 5, he's talking about taming wild animals. Number 9, verse 9, same thing. Verse 13 through 16 of 39 is pretty funny, because it sort of compares human beings to the ostriches, who are not the smartest birds in the world, and they trample their own eggs in their nest. The ostriches are known to do that.
They're always sticking their neck out.
Yeah, apparently it was a phrase in those days to talk about someone being cruel as an ostrich. That was a common idea, and to be cruel as an ostrich was somebody who mistreated their family members, because ostriches were known to step on their young and kill them. Let's see. Anyway, it gets down to verse, the last verses there, 38 through, let's see. Here we go. Verse 40, verse 2. Verse 40, verse 2 is where God finishes. He says, shall a fault finder contend with the Almighty? He who argues with God, let him answer it. So God brings Job face to face with the reality of his humanity, and how far our humanity is removed from divinity. And I think that now we live in an era where we are in grave danger of always letting that happen. We are always in danger of worshiping the creation instead of the creator. Always, we become enamored of things, and even of human ideas and ideals that you'll see placed blatantly in front of God's law, as though, yeah, God, that's fine, but that doesn't really apply anymore. Or that's not really useful anymore. How can and just to bring it home to where we are right now? How can we consider abortion clinics an essential service? Okay, how does that happen in a society? How is it that we have become blind to intentionally blind to the number of babies that are being killed? And it's happened so gradually. From 1973, it has just gradually happened, becoming more and more common. I can remember in the 70s, we were still outraged by abortions. And of course, remember that I'm not talking about abortions in the case of medical necessity or where you're in a situation of two horrendous choices. I'm talking about abortions for the sake of convenient birth control. Because it's not convenient to have a baby right now. And that is what, whether anyone wants to admit it or not, that's what the lion's share of abortions are today, is abortions of convenience. And people love to bring up the 12-year-old little girl who was raped in the park. Okay, that's a hard choice. And if I were the father of that 12-year-old little girl, I know what I'd like to say I would do, but yeah, there might be two deaths. I know what I'd like to say that I would do. I would like to say that life was created and God blessed us with that life, but I've never walked in those shoes. So I'd be really careful about saying, "Oh, absolutely, this is what I would do." So yeah, there are those cases that are really, really difficult and really challenging, but that is not. We love to make the exception the rule, and say, "Well, what about this huge wild exception?" And then say, "Well, that's how it should always be." Then that's true for everybody. No, the vast majority of abortions are abortions of convenience. That you don't have whatever it is, 60,000, 70,000 tragedies, tragic events every year. I don't remember how many it is now. The people in Lutherans for Life could tell you exactly what the number is every year, but it's phenomenal. By the way, to get political again, that as much as I get irritated with our president for stepping on himself half the time, more than half the time. Take his tweeter away. Only president in my lifetime who has come out blatantly for life and went to stood in front of a life rally and proclaimed it as the right thing. Only president. Even Ronald Reagan never actually came out and said it, and he was my favorite president. Sarah says, I had a 12-year-old patient today that wanted an abortion at 30 weeks because she and her mom didn't want to have it. And the resident gave her info about possibly getting it done. Yeah, Sarah's doing her OBGYN rotation right now in the clinic. A 12-year-old pregnant. And is that an easy choice as a parent? No, and thank God I never had to make that choice. Thank God I never had to make that choice.
30 weeks, she could have been 11 when it happened.
Right.
Oh my God.
Right, yeah, she was. Yeah, that's about right. So, but nevertheless,
Tell her we'll take it.
Danya says that we'll take the baby. Okay, so Sarah, go and tell her that you have a couple in Chicago that'll take the baby. Actually, just one person who will take the baby. Yeah. So here we go. Here's the moral of the story for 38 through 39. If we wish to question God, eventually He'll answer. Okay, and then when God answers, we're going to be called to face our faults and our failures. Okay? So the moral of the story is grace is much better. Grace is much better. And instead of questioning God vehemently every time we think he's doing things wrong, instead praising and thanking God for all the things that all the blessings he pours into our lives. So every time you're tempted, and all of us are, to question God, instead pump the brakes and instead count the blessings that he's poured into your life and pray for wisdom. Pray for understanding. That was the great boon from Solomon, is that, what do you want? You can have anything. Well, I want wisdom. And then God says, oh, okay.
We made him 150 years old.
Yeah. Right. Because you've asked for this, because you ask this, not only do you get wisdom, but then you get everything else too. And that tends to be the way God works. In the old stewardship maxim, to him to whom I've given much, much is expected. The better steward you are, the more blessings God pours on, but then the more responsibility you have. So sometimes it's better to be stupid and poor. Less responsibility. All right, let's close with the blessing. And then remember, we're off next Tuesday, and then we're back on the 16th to finish Job. So read the end, Job 41, 42, 43. Lord God, we pray that you'd bless us and keep us, that you'd make your face shine upon us, be gracious unto us, that you'd lift your countenance upon us and give us peace. Amen. All right. See everybody. Hopefully we have technological success next week, or in 2 weeks. Good night.